Okay, so today we're starting Mark chapter 4, and chapter 4 is a lot of the parables that Jesus told. So it's his teaching that he told sort of in stories, in kind of like metaphors, picture stories that are supposed to illustrate a point. And today we're going to read one, but mainly I just want to focus on why he's speaking in parables, because he explains at the end of telling this first one. And I think next time he explains what the parable means. So we'll talk about what the parable means more in detail then. But Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 1, is where we're going. It says, "And Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it out on the lake, while all the people were along the shore at the water's edge. He taught them many things by parables, and in his teaching said, 'Listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. And still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times.' Then Jesus said, 'Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear.' When he was alone, the 12, and that's the 12 disciples, and the others around him asked him about the parables. And he told them, 'The secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you. But to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, so that they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven.'" So, so that's the story. And the main thing I want to focus on here is at the end, because we'll explain the parable of the sower, or Jesus explains it in the next few verses, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So here he explains why is Jesus speaking in these picture stories, and I think what he says is it should be startling to us. He says that the reason he's speaking in parables, when the 12 ask him, it's so that people on the outside may see these things but not actually perceive them, and hear them but not actually understand them. Now Jesus, in other words, he's saying, I'm wanting to speak this way so that only people can hear what I'm teaching but not really understand it. Why would he want to speak that way? I think it's so countercultural to what you see today. Nowadays, I feel like if you were starting a church, people would think, okay, what I need to do is get as many people here as possible. In fact, I need to make the teaching and what I'm saying just as friendly as possible, as inviting as possible, so that we get thousands of people. We need to expand the buildings. Honestly, sometimes I think in a cynical way, people think, churches just want to make money, so they need more and more people. But that is not the way Jesus operated at all. He was not interested in just getting people who, just because his teaching was easy to understand and easy to apply. Easy was just not on Jesus's radar. In fact, the story begins, the reason, or the context of the story is there are many, many, many crowds following Jesus. Instead of Jesus saying, wow, this is great, I'm getting so many followers, I've got so many people who are, following me on social media. Obviously there wasn't social media, but instead of Jesus seeing this and being necessarily excited about all these people, he's almost starting to teach them in a way that's like, okay, I have a ton of crowds, but I want to see who's actually interested. That's what his point is. When he says, whoever has ears to hear, let him hear, he's saying, of these large crowds, I want the people who are really listening. They're the ones I want to be able to understand this. There are going to be some people who hear my parable and say, well, that was a weird story about farming. I guess I'm going to go home and not even think about that. He says if that's how people are going to treat my teaching and not really apply it, they don't even need to hear it. It's like I want to be clear that they're not paying attention. And so And this is especially true. Jesus starts speaking these parables not only when there are crowds, but now that there are religious leaders opposing him. I think Jesus is saying, I don't want casual followers. I don't want Pharisees just saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm a Jesus follower," um, unless they really mean it. And so I'm going to make my teaching more difficult to understand, not because I don't care about people, but because I want it to be clear who my disciples are, who my followers are, and who people are who are really bought in. Jesus is not into just kind of casual fans, people who are just like, oh, that was cool, and you kind of like it. And I think that's really applicable to our culture these days, because I think you see in churches, and we live in the Bible Belt here in Northwest Arkansas, and even in our own lives, there can be this temptation to have Jesus kind of be a hobby. It's like, yeah, I kind of know about Jesus. Yeah, I think he told people to like love each other, but to not, people who've gone to church all their lives and really don't know the Bible at all, who've like been hearing all these sermons and maybe going to church and maybe, but it's like going in one ear and out the other. And Jesus is saying, I'm teaching in parables, so that kind of person, it becomes clear that they're not paying attention. Because I really want people to have to listen so that it really transforms their life. And so I think that's just the application. Even Jesus' first parable is all about what kind of listener are you? Are you a person who listens carefully to understand? Or are you just a casual listener who will listen for a second and then go about their day?